Good evening. Today we're going to have a discussion on what's for dinner in 2028 for a high-end consumer. I suppose before we get into it, we kind of have to start thinking, where in the world will they be? Will they be in the same place that they are now? Will they be eating the same type of cuts? So before we start thinking about the future, we actually have to think about what's happening at present. So if we go back, at present, total beef sales for Fern farms for the 2017 year for all of our frozen and chilled cuts, you can see on the slide that USA, China and New Zealand are the big three. And these three are the big three in terms of everything. So we're also talking grinding beef, we're talking all the lower value cuts as well. But also they are our big three for our highest value cuts. We have the biggest growth opportunities for China and the USA. New Zealand, in the sense of a high value cut, we're probably at the top end of where that market's sitting. And China is also the highest growth region for all high value cuts and also for the biggest range. So we are having to start to look outside for the high end markets outside our traditional staking cuts. So we're starting to look into briskets and short ribs, and you're starting to see them on menus across the world. However, in 10 years' time, market access is going to have a huge factor on where our high-end consumers are going to be based. So if we look at into Korea and Japan, the CPTPP trade agreements, it's a very big long worded word nowadays, is going to be extremely important for us. Currently we're not on a level playing field for us to compete, particularly with US and Australia. So if we get the free market access into there, we will be on a level playing field, and they potentially will be a huge opportunity for us going forward. At the same time, we also have trade negotiations happening with EU and Brexit. Overall, Western markets are actually declining in their red meat consumption, but we've still got that high-end part there for protein. Really, when we're thinking about from a world's perspective, we probably have some of our biggest growth opportunities in the Asian markets, and that's particularly into some of those developing countries. However, if we put all of that aside, without doubt, the two biggest opportunities we have for the high-end consumer are into the US and the China market, which are very, very different. In the US at present, there's a huge swing to grass-fed beef. And a lot of this is associated to health benefits that are associated, that are thought of being a lot more positive for health compared to grain-fed. And as we all know, US is predominantly a grain-fed market. China is our fastest growing high-end consumer, and this is not only for value, they're prepared to pay more, it's also for volume, and they're actually starting to look at a lot more mix because their eating styles are quite different to this. But if we take all that aside, if a US-China trade war occurs, that will have huge ramifications for us for market access, and we really don't know what that will happen. So when we look at from a international perspective, in 10 years, market access has a huge factor on where our high-end consumers will be. Global demand for animal protein. The world's population is increasing, and if we look at Rabobank's global demand for animal protein, you can see that in the next 10 years there will be about a 17% increase in demand for animal protein. Beef will play a part of this, but however, the biggest protein that is going to factor into this increase is going to be chicken, because chicken is cheap. And that's looking at going to have the biggest factor, but we still have to think about beef because we will have an opportunity in there. And then we also have to think about alternative proteins. these will be part of the solution for global proteins. And we're talking here our Impossible Burger, and there's been a lot of coverage about this recently in the media, particularly in New Zealand. We're talking about the Beyond Burgers. And I was very fortunate just recently when I was up in the US to be able to experience eating an Impossible Burger, a Beyond Burger, and I actually did a taste testing panel versus a grain-fed US burger. And from a person who doesn't normally eat burgers and is traditionally a steak eater, I actually couldn't taste the difference between an Impossible Burger and a grain-fed US burger. So they're here to stay. We need to make sure that when we're looking at going into those markets that we're differentiating them. And to do that, we have to make sure that what we are producing is at the highest standards possible. So at Fern Farms, we have developed an eating quality system. Now this eating quality system is based off a huge big scientific trial we ran with consumers all across New Zealand and the US back about 5 years ago. And that we have now developed a standard where all of our prime animals that go through our 3 cold boning plants will be graded, and then they will go through a grading system, and then they will determine whether they pass our quality standard to go into our reserve branded product, which is our high-end value-added beef. Now out of that, we've now got some significant numbers in behind that. We've actually just passed over grading 600,000 prime animals, and of that, on average, only 33% of those animals will actually make our reserve grade. So we are putting into place a quality system that is extremely important. So from a farmer's perspective, there actually is quite a lot of stuff that on farm you guys can actually do to make sure that you can have your animals producing at the best, highest quality. You know, we would have seen through some of the recordings that you're going to see coming up, there's a whole heap of stuff around stock management that's going to affect the eating quality. We've also, and it's without doubt, one of the most important things from a quality perspective for beef is around marbling. And this has a huge factor on farm because you can have quite a major influence on this. A lot of it's around feeding. It's about making sure the animals are finished. And then you have to make sure that you have the right genetics. You have to make sure you've got animals that can lay down intermuscular fat. And so from a quality perspective, for a high-end consumer, fat is good. So consumers are now have these expectations, and their expectations are, you know, it's not what we like to be able to do, this is what they expect. So the Never Ever programs that you're starting to see coming out, these are 100% antibiotic free, 100% hormone free, 100% GMO free, 100% grain fed free. So these are part of what a consumer expects, and a lot of this, there are a few things that can catch out some of our farming systems. For antibiotics in particular, a lot of people aren't aware that a lot of the bloat remedies are actually antibiotics. So if we're thinking about if we're in finishing systems and we need to put capsules in or use bloat oil, these are actually antibiotics. We need to start identifying all animals that have been administered antibiotics, and we need to include this, all of the bloat remedies as well. So that's a real easy thing you can do back at home to start remedying some of this stuff. Also, when we're talking about these 100% feedlot free, there's a huge pushback, particularly in the US, around this kind of stuff, and they want it all to be grass-fed. And when we're talking grass-fed, we're talking pasture in situ, so animals can graze ad lib. And so that's covering crops and our grass and our clovers and legumes and that kind of stuff. So we're kind of covering that whole scenario of grass, so that's what falls under that sort of grass umbrella. And then from there, some of the stuff that we're starting to, the consumer's looking about is animal welfare. Now, I was just back, when I was back in the US just recently, we're in one of the top-end supermarkets in New York, and they had behind every piece of protein in their butchery a 5-step animal welfare guide. Now, this is up to 5+. Most of our New Zealand farm systems would only sit at about a 3 or a 4. So you can see that consumers are starting to purchase on animal welfare. And they're not only just making purchasing decisions on that, they're making purchasing decisions on, is this environmentally friendly? Is this sustainable? And you know, we could be in 10 years' time, is this a carbon neutral farm? So one of the other really important things is going to be around traceability. We need to be able to have the ability to link customers or consumers to the source. So at present we don't quite have the technology to do the whole supply chain, but at Silver Fern Farms we've started down that track. We're in partnership with Oratane, which is a company that can verify the authenticity of where the product comes from, and they do that from a science-based system where they can identify the soil isotopes. So we can know that that product has come from New Zealand, which, believe it or not, is actually a really major factor, particularly if we're in Asian markets, so that they can guarantee that's a New Zealand product. And from that system we can actually now take our products back to the plant that they were processed at, and then I suppose the holy grail is being able to take that back down to the farm it's come from. So we're not there yet, we potentially will be getting there. There's a few other things that we're working on behind the scenes around, and we're at Silver Fern Farms are leading the way around electronic ASDs. We have got the ability now with all of our plants bar one to be able to send an electronic ASD. The next steps behind that are we're going to be able to do that from the whole supply chain, right from the breeder through to the finisher, but we're not quite there yet. So from a consumer, they want to have that, they want to know where it's come from, and they want to have that trust in the brand. High-end consumers are really conscious of where their food is coming from. So it's really important that we can link that whole supply chain, and they really want to hear about that family farming unit, and particularly intergenerational. They really love that story, they can relate to people, and we've got to be really good at promoting what happens at that grassroots through to consumers and through to the chefs so they can get a better understanding. But it's also both ways. So it's really important that also that you on farm can have a really good understanding of actually what happens at the end market. So there's got to be a lot more linkage in that sort of scenario. So the two biggest trends that we potentially could see in 2028 is going to be truly clean and customised for me. So what does that mean? So truly clean. Truly clean is, there's a whole movement at present around clean food, but actually truly clean is no additives. So that, you know, there's a lot of stuff out there on the market at present. In 10 years' time, that might not be identified as truly clean. So we're very well positioned with our farming systems here in New Zealand because we're natural and we have to go down that natural scenario. So it's naturally grass-fed, it's naturally marbled, it's ethical, it's environmentally friendly, and this is all going to go under that truly clean banner. And then the other trend that we potentially will see in 2028 is customised for me. So what does that mean? That is about with the ability with artificial intelligence, not artificial insemination, which what most of you guys are used to. It's going to be about actually being able to have customised nutrition for what you actually can have for your body. So you will have the ability to be able to test your body to see actually what you need to do to fuel it. And so our high-end consumers are going to have that disposable income that's going to enable them to be able to determine exactly what they are required to eat to fuel their bodies. So these are quite different. The technology's just kind of starting there, but in 10 years' time, it could be quite different. So when we're looking at the future, how people are eating, it could be quite different to how they're eating now. And when we're looking at that customised for me, that's not going to be a blanket spread over what everyone, this is what everyone should be eating. It's actually going to be on what actually I require to be eating. In 10 years' time, food is still going to be important. We all need food. And there's plenty of places around the world where food it's a cultural tradition. So it's still going to be super important for what they're eating around protein, and it's about, you know, a cultural family tradition around eating food. But it might be different. Our beef in 10 years' time might not necessarily be the hero of the plate. It will be a component of what's on the plate. But taste will still continue to be important. But overall, it's going to be about creating a delicious experience. And we're very fortunate here in New Zealand. We have so many of the stepping stones to be able to contribute to being able to produce a delicious experience that's going to be backed up by quality, that's going to be traceable, that's going to hit all of our requirements for a high-end consumer. So we have the framework to be able to feed into these consumers that have that disposable income.